Have you wondered what financial advisors actually think about finances? This is your sneak peek at the conversations within Financial Design Studio. Michelle Smollenberger, the CEO here, will be your host as you go behind the designs.
Welcome back to the podcast. For those of you who are new, I'm Michelle Smollenberger, your host, and we're really building off a couple of previous episodes that we've been having. This episode today actually ties back to ones on college funding and using conversations to develop strong family relationships. But today we want to shift perspectives and share how the younger generation thinks about these issues and what matters to them. So today's episode is how do you set your kids up for success? You know, we hear this a lot from clients, but I think it's very common that we might interview someone who's doing this, who's like, what are the things that you did because your kids are successful? But today I thought let's take a little bit different approach and let's actually hear from someone who I would say has been set up for success and is in the middle of kind of big transitions in life or preparing for those. And how would you describe what that was like on your side of the seat? So today we have our creative director, Anna, joining us again as a guest. So welcome, Anna.
Hello, everyone. It's fun to be back on this side of the mic.
So Anna has, in her left hand, she has the soundboard controlling the controls, and in her right hand, a microphone. Well, we hear over and over again clients talk about how important it is that they leave a legacy and to prepare and equip their kids. We want our kids to have good lives, but how do you entrust them with this responsibility? That's really kind of one of the big challenges. But it's also worth noting that the world has drastically changed from when we were kids and how we experience the world. So what worked for older generations may not anymore, and what was impossible for previous generations may actually be really easy to do today. So that's why we want to hear from someone who is experiencing this through today's world, through your eyes. And also, too, I think this may be an example if you find that you're an older person who maybe struggles to have this conversation with someone who's younger. This may be a perfect example of how to have this conversation and maybe just kind of the tone and how you talk about it. And it doesn't always have to be absolute. So just listening and really thinking through some of these questions and the way we ask them, I think could be really helpful. We're going to talk this out. So, Anna, just to really start us off high level, would you say you've been set up for success?
I mean, I would say, yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say you have. So that's where, and a lot of this is kind of like, we want to hear your point of view. So this is great. So I want to make sure that you feel you're someone who has been.
Yes, I do.
Okay, now I think to really set the stage, because as parents, we want our kids, when we say successful, and we'll talk about this, but we want them to do well at all ages. So it's not like you get to this point and then after college is done, now you're successful.
Right.
So just so we know who we're listening to today, mind sharing, what is your age?
Yes, as of right now, 2024, I am 19 years old.
Mm-hmm. So I think this will just help people to kind of put perspective. Okay, so Anna, do you agree today's world it is different than, maybe I grew up in? And even as we have conversations, I think that's highlighted.
I mean, 100%. And I have only just begun to realize this. Mm-hmm. I'm in a lot of classes right now online for school, and we talk a lot about globalization, this concept of how we are so connected to Asia and to Africa, and we can know what's going on there at any time, with a click of a button. Mm-hmm. And that's the world I know. I've never known another world. And so to me, the concept that that's unusual, mm-hmm. that boggles my mind. Mm-hmm. I haven't known a time without the iPhone. Mm-hmm. I remember my grandma had a flip phone, and I was like, what is that? Yes. And I was only like 5, Mm-hmm. I don't remember a time without the iPhone. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the things that makes my generation, Gen Z, so unique. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we are growing up in a very different time, mm-hmm. but that's weird to say because it's all I've ever known. Mm-hmm. But for the rest of the world, it's the future.
Exactly. And I think that's where sometimes, I think that's what brings in the challenge, is because how does someone older who didn't grow up in that relate to someone who that's all they've known? So I think that's kind of where some of the tension lies in there, is how do I relate to you? And so these are things, this is going to be really helpful to just understand some of these points throughout your life. It's not that you have to experience the exact same thing to be able to relate to each other or to be able to do this well. It's just knowing, how can I relate to you and how can we talk about these differences and understand them so that I can help you. Kind of give us a little bit of background. Why don't you share like some of your story, kind of like throughout that, how your parents set you up for success? Why don't you kind of share some of that with us?
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said, I am just 19, so I graduated high school 2 years ago. And I feel like the way I've introduced myself for most of my life is, hi, I'm Anna Lewis. I was homeschooled because I was homeschooled. So that's a huge part of my story. Second grade, my parents decided to homeschool me and my siblings. That's another interesting thing about me. I have 5 siblings. I am one of 6.
The oldest of 6.
I am the oldest of 6. So between being homeschooled and having 5 siblings, I had a lot of interesting opportunities that not many people get. I was homeschooled through Classical Conversations. And so this was a Christian program, and they taught us all the like traditional homeschool things. So like, I'm fluent in ancient Latin. Who speaks Latin? I do. I can draw the world from memory. I had a senior thesis where I defended an argument in front of a panel of judges. So I just had a lot of very interesting, very unique educational experiences through being homeschooled that I wouldn't trade for the world. I loved being homeschooled. So yeah.
I think too. I mean, it's amazing actually how many more people today are homeschooled. I mean, we even see among clients more people are doing that, and it's actually even surprising that it's not always even the mom. A lot of dads actually stay home and homeschool kids.
Right,
so it's
yeah.
just interesting how we even see like these things increasing more and more.
And honestly, I personally loved being homeschooled, and I would probably homeschool my kids, and I would recommend to everyone, I think you should homeschool your kids. But you know, to each their own.
I remember when Emma was going to school, it's like deciding, okay, what can I do? Like if you're working.
Right.
Okay, that's probably not an option. And then you are deciding. And so today there's just so much more choice, which again, there's more choice today than maybe there has been. So that's helpful. Those are like really important things about you. When we kind of talk about, I guess, before we continue like with your story, I guess when we define success, like this is kind of something one person can say something, another person can say another thing. So I guess, what do you think of like when you kind of define success, like what would you say that looks like?
Yeah, so before starting any conversation, I always like to define my terms. And so before this podcast, I was looking, I was Googling, like, what are the different definitions of success? And the one that I liked the most, I can't remember where I saw it, but it was talking about how success is accomplishing a purpose you set out to accomplish. So success doesn't necessarily mean, oh, I have the mansion, and oh, I have, all the money, or I have the title, or I have, if that's the purpose you set out to accomplish, then yeah, that's success. But success can be anything. So I think to be successful, you have to first have a goal. And that's something that a lot of people miss. They just go, oh, I want to be successful, without defining, well, what do you want to succeed at? So that's how I would define success.
Yeah, so you kind of talk about, I think what's great about that definition is in the definition itself, it's very personal. So you're setting what it is, and then did I accomplish it or not? So
Right.
I do like that definition, because that's a great place to start, because we're not telling people this is what this looks like. So if your kids reach this, great. If not, you didn't reach it. So I think that's helpful. So I guess then in what purposes we set out to accomplish, like what matters to me is something, different than what matters to you. So just kind of walk us through, I guess, if you could kind of generalize this, what matters to younger generations, like what does success mean? And I guess what experiences have kind of led you to this maybe?
Yeah, so one of the things that fascinates me is learning about the differences between generations. So that's, silent generation, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, now Gen Z, and then my younger siblings are actually Gen Alpha. These are the iPad kids. I have loved studying and identifying the differences between the generations and seeing what historical events have driven them to care about what they care about. And for Gen Z, again, we have grown up in a time that is just so new. We have the internet in our pockets. We have social media. Social media is huge. We also have all kinds of financial crises happening. Like the cost of living is insane. The cost of college is insane. And Gen Z has to figure out a way to survive that. And then also like a pandemic. When has that ever happened before? When I turned 16, there was a pandemic. I learned to drive on roads that no one was on, The world that I grew up in during high school was a ghost town. And that's so different from literally everyone else on the face of planet Earth. So Gen Z just has we have a very concentrated childhood full of all kinds of really historical events. So things we care about are going to be different than other people. However, I think that we still share a lot of the same concerns. One of the biggest things I've seen with Gen Z is Gen Z cares a lot about experiences. So because we've been so disconnected through A, social media, and B, from like the pandemic, like the rise of mental illness contributes to that significantly. So Gen Z cares a lot about experiences. Like, can you be in the moment? Can you have a work-life balance? Can I develop good friendships? So that's something super important to Gen Z that I've noticed.
I think one of the things that and this is, I'm noticing it more and more because Emma just turned 11. And so I think in trying to like help her understand, you know, like as you have someone, when you have someone you're mentoring or teaching, you kind of try to understand where they're coming from so that you can teach them from where, you know, their point of view is. And so I think these are things that I wish, you know, I hope that younger people know that it's possible. I guess I just want to give like some encouragement, you know, because this is actually like a perfect example of if I'm talking to you about this.
Right.
And just like people listening, it's like, yes, it's possible. But you do have to work for it, and you do have to be purposeful about it. So I think that's what I love about the purposes you want to accomplish. What are those? And then, am I successful? This is where it all comes back to. So it's like you do have to work for that. You do have to know, well, what is it that I need to get better at? So walk us through. I would like to hear, so that everyone can kind of understand more of, so you were homeschooled, you have a lot of siblings, you're the oldest, which I think is also something that we'll talk about because people will be like, oh, the oldest is always firstborn, you know, they're the ones that are always driven, taking care of everybody. But I know you, as we've talked through this, like your siblings are, you know, similar in ways to you, to where they've been given these opportunities too to be set up for success, and so they are also thriving in those and in their own ways. Like you're all different, so I think that's helpful. So now, kind of knowing kind of who you are, just some of these core, you know, things that how you experience life. Walk us through then. How did you kind of move from college, being homeschooled, how did you walk through, and what was that if you were being set up for success? Kind of describe some of these different points you've taken, you know, even to get to here at FDS to be our creative director. Kind of describe some of those and how you got here.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things would be the internship I had at my church. I attend Harvest Bible Chapel, and that is a larger church, and so there are a lot of opportunities to serve. My mom worked for the children's ministry there, and a woman who's now my mentor, she was the senior director of the kids ministry, and I was serving there. I was serving on the worship team. I was in, what was I, like 7th, 8th grade, and I was building this team of 4th and 5th graders who wanted to help serve on the worship team. And so I was like teaching them how to engage with worship and teaching them like how to serve. And so the senior director saw me do this, and she was like, I want you on my team. So she asked me to join the kids ministry as an unpaid intern. I was an unpaid intern for many years. And that internship might be one of the most impactful things in my life. Some Gen Z slang, that's a canon event. Without that event, I would not be who I am today. So through this internship, I got the opportunity to do so many things, so many things that like most people would never get the chance to do in their entire life. So I built a worship team. I am very skilled at leading volunteers, which I discovered and I love. I had the opportunity to do all kinds of like physical space promotions. So I got to like create decorations for the lobby to promote different events. I am very skilled in running a snow cone machine. So if you need a good snow cone, hit me up. But like I got to do all kinds of things. And every year, one of the things that was most impactful is an event that we always did called High Five. High Five was like our kids' VBS, you know, summer day camp thing. And as I was an unpaid intern over the years, my role and responsibility increased. And so I could see myself developing in leadership and in administration and in creativity and all these things. So like one year I remember I was the stage manager for our production. So I was responsible for coordinating with our production team. I was responsible for coordinating with our like different characters, scripts, supplies, stage hands, making sure things got to places where they needed to go. Another year, I was the student volunteer coordinator because we have a lot of students, a lot of these like middle school and high schoolers who want to serve and be with these kids and help out. But, you know, students can be challenging to work with. And so we needed someone to be their point person and their leader to help them to make sure they were on the right path. And so I got to lead 80 students and be responsible for them and help teach them how to serve. And that was such a cool experience. But like, most people never get that experience in their entire lifetime. So I learned so much at this internship. And one of the biggest pieces, I think, besides like the different experiences I got, was there were a lot of really incredible women there who poured into me. I was on a team of like, I mean, it changed over the years, but like 10 women, and they were some really incredible people. They had some really incredible skills, and they poured into me, and they built me up, and they gave me opportunities, and they coached me, and they said, maybe try this, and they listened to my ideas, and they helped me develop into who I am. So I would not be who I am without that internship, but especially not without that team. That was the dream team, and I'm so grateful that I got to be a part of the Harvest Kids staff.
I think we even called them the dream team back then.
Listen, we were the dream team. We made things happen.
Yep. So something that's interesting, so I want to highlight, and then we're going to keep going with your story, because like these experiences, so one thing that's interesting that you highlighted is you were kind of doing something. So you were just volunteering. Like there was a point where you were just volunteering and you were trying to help someone get better at doing something. And your mentor now just like picked you and basically, I mean, didn't necessarily say you are the one. She just said, hey, you're really good at this. And so something to highlight for adults is that we have the ability to see gifts in people and to see talents in people.
Yes.
And to call that out and just to build them up and encourage them in those things.
Yes. I have seen that play such a huge role. There have been different adults in my life, well, when I was younger, different adults who would look at me and tell me that I am good at something, and I'd be like, what do you mean? And they would help me with that skill, and they would help develop me. And even now, like, I'm only 19, and so there are a lot of other places where I'm serving where I've had people call out skills in me and call out traits in me and positioned me so that I can use those well and use those efficiently.
But it's like this encouraged, like supported kind of way of, I know I'm supported in the things that I'm good at. And someone else saw that enough and told me, like they, you know, took the time to just say, hey, I think this is something you could probably do more of and continue to get even better. So,
right.
Okay. So I think that's helpful for adults to realize. And then, because we're trying to kind of make this an example of like what people kind of how to have this conversation too, from your perspective, I'm sure. And like you even said, like this was a pivotal moment. So like you even seeing, hey, this was huge that someone, so like realizing kind of, they didn't have to do that, but they did. They, you know, she took the time to say, hey, this is something you're really good at. And I noticed that you like keep going in that.
Right.
Okay. All right. So let's keep going. So you had an internship, but you knew you wouldn't be an intern forever, I'm assuming? Like you didn't want to just keep doing this?
Right. As much as I love kids and kids ministry, and as good as I am with little children, it's not what I'm most passionate about. And so this internship was a really cool opportunity for me to grow and figure out what I liked because I got to experiment around. But it wasn't forever, and I knew that.
Can you tell us, like, do you remember what ages you roughly were when you did that internship?
Oh, great question. 8th grade, so that's when I was asked. I don't know how
14.
14. Oh. And then I
15.
Quit in 2022.
And the only reason I'm highlighting these things because one of the things you can do with this podcast is to share this with someone who's younger, because it doesn't mean that they have to have the same exact experience that you did, but they could be volunteering in sports. They could be they could be volunteering at the park district, like anywhere. And they're kind of able to say, oh, she was doing it at these ages. And so it just gives people kind of a perspective of time.
Yes. I think one of the best things that you can do at a young age is volunteer. Get an internship, even if it's unpaid. Like, just try some things. Go to a place where you can experiment. Because it was through experimenting with different roles at this internship that I found out what I was good at and what I liked. And that's not numbers, but that is creativity and promoting things and working with volunteers and working with people. So
yeah, and if you asked me like today, if you said, hey, if there were clients and they said, hey, my kids are looking for ways to volunteer. I mean, I know I'm on boards of not-for-profits, and I'd be like, absolutely.
Right.
I've been on junior boards. So it's just, there are so many opportunities. So
yeah,
that's good. Okay, so that's helpful. Okay, so you didn't want to stay an intern forever. So where did you go from there?
this was actually during my internship, and it was actually during 2020. Surprise, surprise. When I was 16, the pandemic hit, and I have always been a creative person, and I have always drawn things. So in 2020, I was sending cards to people. I was just, doing little designs, sending them to friends, being like, hang in there, like I'm thinking of you and praying for you, whatever. But I heard from a couple different people like, hey, I really like your card designs. Like, what if you sold these? And I was like, that is an interesting thought. I have a lot of free time right now, and this is something that I can make money off of and something that I enjoy. So I said, you know what? Why not start an Etsy shop? So I started my Etsy shop, Fulcrum Inc., and that was a cool experience. I learned so much. I started the shop because I was like, I need to start figuring out what I want to do with my career, and I want to see if I want to run a business. So let me run, a little Etsy shop and see if I like it. So I made all these designs. I designed all these cards. I hand drew them on my iPad, and then I would print them out, and I would cut them, and I would fold them in envelope, and I'd be responsible for, shipping them out and promoting them on Etsy. And I had an old Instagram page, which I'll link in the show notes because I'm actually really proud of this Instagram page at Fulcrum Inc. Check it out. But I did this whole Etsy shop, and then as the pandemic ended, I started doing vendor markets. So I would go to craft fairs and different events, and I would sell my cards and notebooks and stickers in person. That might be my favorite thing, the thing that I enjoyed the most with that. I really loved getting to stand in front of people and say, like, hey, like, here are my cards, here are my designs, here's where they came from, and just hear the feedback of, like, wow, I really like this. And me being like, yay, someone likes my work, So that Etsy shop was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, and that was something I learned. I was like, oh, running a business is going to be a lot of work, which, if you're going to run a business, you should know that up front. So I don't still do Fulcrum Inc., although if you want custom cards, you're always welcome to reach out because I love designing things. I was like, this physical product, like e-commerce shop, is just not going to be a sustainable future for me. But I did make a good amount of money off of it, and I really enjoyed it, and it was a cool experience to get to test the entrepreneurial world.
Okay, so something in this is we're highlighting kind of like how you were set up in these different experiences for success. So one we've said is like people telling you, hey, you're good at this. When you did that Etsy shop, was that something that kind of as you earned money, then you kind of had money for supplies? Do you remember if like you kind of got seed money from your parents or you had savings? Like how were you set up to do that well?
Right. So the process for coming up with my Etsy shop was kind of spur of the moment. I just decided one day, like, okay, I'm going to start an Etsy shop. Like I said, I'm a creative person, so I'm often buying things off of Etsy, so I knew it was possible. And how did I fund it? Well, I am a minimalist for sure. And so even though I wasn't making a lot of money at 16, read that as barely any, I do have a lot of savings. So I was able to pull some savings, and running a card shop isn't that expensive. I just had to buy, a set of cardstock, and I had a printer and buy some envelopes, and I had an iPad. And so I was able to get started. Starting the Etsy shop was only like $20 or something. And then Etsy just took a percentage of each of my profits. So it wasn't a super upfront, cost-heavy type of a project, which that's one of the reasons I did it. So I was able to just really easily take care of that. And get started really quickly, which is also something that I think is very different from previous generations. I woke up one day and was like, I'm going to start a business. And so I made it happen. Versus in the past, like I know starting a business was a huge affair and you had to do all these things and you had to have all this money for you to even, break even. That's just not the case with the internet and Amazon and, the digital world.
And I think that's something for kind of like this Gen Z's, kind of this younger age group, to like see and realize that when you have an idea, it's okay. Like you could try it, and like when you were doing it, you kind of knew it was possible because you bought from there. So you kind of saw like other creatives doing this. But even someone who said, I have this like really wild idea and I don't know if it's possible, you can always talk to parents, friends.
Yes. So this is where we bring up a very important character in my life, which is my father. My dad is a experienced entrepreneur who has sold multiple businesses. He's a CTO, so he builds all kind of tech. It's been really cool to grow up watching him build businesses, watching him, work on problems, watching him be a CEO. And so when I realized like, hey, maybe I want to start a business, I was like, oh, I know someone who is quite literally an expert at this. So I was like, hey, Dad, like, if I wanted to start an Etsy shop, like, what do I need to do? What are the things I need to consider? So, like, he walked me through, and even though he didn't know how to run an Etsy shop, he helped me, like, research and figure out things. And he was my first purchase because, what happened when someone purchases a card? Like, I don't know. So he was like, I'll buy your first card, and I'll write you your first review. And, like, he quite literally helped set me up for success in that way by being my first purchase. So that was super helpful to hear from him, like, here's things you're going to want to focus on. Here's things you're not going to want to focus on. Here's, what it's going to be like.
No, that's huge. That's where it's like helping people kind of see, like, these are the points at which along the way there's conversations sometimes. And even parents, if you're like, oh, well, I haven't helped my kids set up big savings accounts, like you're saying, it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be in the moment. Oh, you need $100 or you need paper or something like this. It can be even just like that. So don't, this is where all of these limiting voices, I think people can hear and they can get stuck on. And we always say, like, perfection is the enemy of getting something done. And so it's like,
this is true.
Do not stop, like, limit yourself. And so the whole point of this is how can people help you? So that's really helpful. So that's helpful to understand kind of how you started that Etsy shop. Also interesting as we're progressing through, like, your internship, then kind of setting up the shop, you were noticing, like, things about yourself that you are a creative, that you do like to see things certain ways. And so you're seeing things about who you are, and you're working through this process of, I liked this about this, but okay, this isn't going to be forever. So what is it? And you kind of moved on to something a little bit different, but some of these all will kind of have, like, also similar traits to them too. Okay. So after Etsy shop, you set this up, describe kind of that, how long it went or what was next.
I started it in 2020, and I think I just recently stopped doing it. So last year, so 2023, it's 3 years.
Okay. So it's kind of something like, you're like, okay, I've tried it. I know that's not going to be it for now. Like, it might be something that you keep doing. Okay, so how did you kind of move on for that? Or when did you realize, like, I need something different?
Yeah, so for all of these, it just kind of opportunities opened and doors closed, and so I walked on, things just kind of came up. So at this point, I'm still doing my internship, I'm still doing my Etsy shop, and I realized, yeah, Self, you're going to have to make some actual money, and you're going to have to get an actual job. That's what a responsible human being does. So I actually emailed a CEO I knew, Michelle, and was like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you have any openings? Like, I can be an administrative assistant. Like, I'm happy to do just office tasks. And FDS and the team were like, yeah, sure. Like, come on, we'd love to have you. Because you guys had seen me at this internship. You guys had seen me, like, coordinate volunteers. So you knew I had some skills, I hope.
Yeah.
And so I asked for a job. You guys said yes. I was the administrative assistant for 1 year. And then I started taking on different marketing tasks. I started seeing different, opportunities there. We quickly realized that financial help was not my strong suit. So I started doing creative things and started doing marketing and, like, organizing birthday cards and then designing birthday cards and then posting things. And then, now I'm hosting a podcast. And so here we are. So I became the creative director at FDS. And so as my responsibilities at FDS grew, that's when Fulcrum Inc., my Etsy shop, started to taper off, and that's also when the internship started to taper off. So both of those kind of ended as I became creative director here, which makes complete sense. And it was the right timing, and the doors opened and the doors shut exactly as they needed to.
Yeah, and it was kind of, I mean, you're kind of morphing into, okay, what does this look like maybe in a career?
Right.
You know, kind of from volunteer to, okay, I developed a lot of skills, and so now in my career, what might I want to do to earn a living? Because you know, many parents, their goal, most, I would say, is that they want their kids to be able to, you know, take care of themselves, to have, you know, earn a living and to pay their expenses and not live in their basement forever. So like this is what most parents want. And so, this is like a natural progression. And I just remember too, like when you were doing those things, like, yeah, we saw you doing those, like we knew your family. And when you emailed, like we weren't necessarily looking for anyone, but at the same time, like we knew there were things that were kind of like, okay, there are things that you could do. And so it's just kind of become, you know, something where now, then over time, it was like your strengths and abilities and gifts. We're like, oh, okay, let's see, you know, we just kind of kept adding on to that and changing it. So, so yeah, so you've kind of seen now, so now it's kind of morphed into this. Okay, so now kind of as we keep going, kind of walk us into the next stage, or what was it you added to your plate then?
Yeah, so I was creative director, and then I graduated high school. And so now I am in college. I am an online student at Southeastern University in Florida. I am studying for a bachelor's degree in business leadership. And this summer, once I finish this summer semester, I will actually graduate and have my bachelor's degree, which is insane to have a bachelor's degree at 20. But that was made possible through my homeschool program. This homeschool program had a partnership with the college, so I was able to get a lot of dual credit. And I've worked a lot of summer semesters on different courses, and so I've kind of jumped ahead through all of that. But I've been able to work on the side, which is amazing, and I've been able to pay for college almost completely by myself, which is insane. I also know that I have a super unique situation with this homeschool program. They gave us like a discount through the college. It's like a whole partnership. It's amazing. And then I also got lots of aid through the FAFSA, which we talked about in our last podcast. Go fill that out because I can confirm it's super helpful. And then, you know, working here at FDS, I was able to pay for it, and I'm happy to say graduate debt-free, which is something not many people can say. So that's another cool opportunity that I had. So once I'm done with my bachelor's degree, it's like, oh man, now what do I do? And that is a whole different conversation. That is the like, what do I want to do with my life? Why am I here? That is an existential question. Right now where I'm going with that is I started an actual business with my dad called Top Hat Trivia. So we do live trivia at different bars and restaurants around Chicagoland. And this came from my parents because they love trivia. And my dad was like, hey, I can design a better trivia system than, you know, writing things on paper. So he built a whole app that we've been able to use in different locations around Chicagoland. And so I said, okay, I will CEO that. I will sell it, and I will, you know, see if I can make that my quote-unquote 9 to 5. I decided to do that like right now going out of college, because if you're 20 and you're still living with your parents and you have a source of income, that is the right time to try and be an entrepreneur, because if you fail, like, you still have so much life ahead of you. So that's something that I learned from a lot of different people in my life who are like, if you can do it now, now's the best time to try. So I said, okay, I'm going to try. And so that's where I think I'm heading. If anybody wants trivia nights, reach out. I'd be happy to be of service to you.
Is it tophattrivia.com?
Tophattrivia.com. So I will link that in the comments. I can tell you all about how we are unique and what our services do, but then this would be a sponsored podcast.
Nope, that's good. This is helpful. Okay, so as we go back through, I want to just kind of jump back to one. So you were talking about being the creative director here and doing online classes, and we've talked a lot about this. But by having a part-time job, there's a lot of things. So even just now, like you're working in marketing, and these are things where you've thought like, oh, maybe I'll be a marketing director. Maybe I'll do that. But maybe it's business leadership. And as you've been kind of trying to figure this out, what's interesting is like you're getting a lot of experience doing things that you would be be doing. So once you graduate from college, like you would be doing these things once you graduate.
Right.
But by having a part-time job now in a field that you think you would want to do, you're actually getting to try these things now and decide, is that something I want to do or not? Or is there a better way to do them than, you're finding like all these new technologies and things like that.
Right.
So kind of describe a little bit about that and how you feel like that's helping you, even as you're kind of like looking into, what's my first job going to be, full-time job?
Haha, so controversial youth states their controversial opinion. I think college is the biggest waste of my time and money that I have ever experienced, and I'm so over it. You all are going to tell me, oh, young 19-year-old, like, surely you're wrong. Surely there's something you're getting out of college. Like, don't be so hasty. You don't know how this will pay off in, your upcoming life. But that's where I almost want to argue. I think the world has changed. I think the world has changed drastically. And I think there's more value in experience than there is in knowledge. Now, obviously, take this with a grain of salt. There are different circumstances. For instance, if you are studying to be a psychologist or you're going to be a doctor, yes, please go to college. We want you to go to college. That's absolutely necessary. If you're going to college for, let's say, business leadership, if you're going to college for music, if you're going to college for, something along those lines, I almost want to say, like, don't go to college. Go get an internship. Go get experience. It was the weirdest thing taking my marketing course while I was running marketing for FDS. I was like, what am I learning in this course right now that I'm not already doing and that I didn't already figure out for myself? Nothing. So I'm paying all this money for this course that it's not serving me. So that was a very interesting realization to be like, man, what is college actually doing for me? At this point, it's just giving me the piece of paper that says, yeah, I went to college, which, I feel like I could do without if I'm going to be my own startup CEO. But of course, that's also the 19-year-old talking, and we will see if that actually pans out. I would say, though, I know for sure that our college system is broken. The fact that you have to pay so much money for something that doesn't have as much payoff as you think it does, like, that's gross. That's just gross. I don't want to be a part of that. And
Yeah, so I think what's interesting here, so it's funny because we have these conversations often. And I'm going to
we
now
have
play
all
the
these conversations.
The parent and grandparent role of no, like there is something, and I even asked you this the other day. I'm like, surely there is one thing that you can say, like you learned in class that you didn't from experience. So so we have these conversations. Be like, wait, someone set her straight. I do think, and this is what you'll hear in the last episode where we were talking about like just a lot of recent changes to college education. Everything is very expensive. And from when I went to college even versus now when you're in school, the costs are just so inflated and so high. And so something does have to change. What I think is really interesting in this is just like you didn't go to public school or private school, but you were homeschooled. So just like in that, there is this wide range of choice that you have. And I mean, when I look back at my experiences, I can say experience in these different roles that I had in all these part-time jobs. Those are the things that did give me the most help in my job. There were things though, so depending on what it is you're going into, like I had to have, there's the knowledge and the experience. And so depending on what it is that you're trying to go into, like the knowledge, I had to have the knowledge.
Right.
And so like there's just there's tax laws, there are things that you have to know. And so it depends. A lot of this really depends what you're going into.
Right.
And what's also interesting is that you're kind of saying right now, I do not see any use for this. As, being a CEO now, I could say, I'm like, oh, okay, now a master's degree would be really beneficial. Now, had I gone down the business track instead of, financial planning, that might be really beneficial right now. And so I think what's really interesting And this will be interesting to see if this is kind of how future education shapes is, you get education kind of for like not necessarily what you need now, but kind of like this next step you're about to take. You're learning what you're going to need to know. And then, it may be that and hopefully people are learning their whole lives. And so that you're always kind of taking courses. And, just as advisors, we're always having to learn too. So just things like this, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this changes and shapes and, even for you to look back and kind of be like, oh, was there something, over time? Like that's what we'll see. But again, it's kind of your view versus how you're experiencing life currently. And now it'll be interesting as you progress over the next few years, like, okay, now would I say the same thing? Was there stuff, or did I actually need just more and now more specific education than my general credits for now what I need? And so this is why, a lot of people will go on to further learning like a master's and a doctorate to get like so much of that specific education and that one thing they want. So I think it's just an interesting perspective for people to, again, be reminded also that college is not the only option. So many kids, are like, I just love doing things like maybe you're going to be an electrician or something like that. And it's a trade. And so actually trade schools, community colleges are so affordable. There are so many good programs. And so just for people to remember, there are so many options out there. So
this is true.
I think that's helpful. Okay. So we're going to come back and kind of define like what these things are that people can do to set their kids up for success. But just kind of describe how you would see this isn't only just for you, but even your siblings, that you would say it's not just because I was the oldest, not just because I was the one taking care of everyone else that I had these skills. How do you kind of see like even your siblings being set up for success and how they're different than you, but they're even stepping into that and like making it their own and kind of like reaching their own goals?
Right. So again, this is something I've wondered. Am I where I am today just because it's in my personality to be ambitious and be driven? Or is it actually something that, was developed in me? And I would say it has to have been something that's developed in me because me and my 5 siblings all operate the same way. We are all very driven people. Of course, we're driven in different capacities. Not all of them are straight A students working at financial firms at 19. They all have their own passions and things that they're doing. So like my next youngest sister, she is 17 and she is the catering manager at Chick-fil-A. She's like running Chick-fil-A and her shifts and her team and, she's a total boss. And she is a very different person than I am and she's taking a very different route than I am. But she too is driven and is succeeding. And my other sister, she, she's not so much ambitious in the career sense, but she wanted to learn to play instruments. So she taught herself acoustic, and then she taught herself electric. Oh, and then she taught herself bass. She's learning piano and drums right now. So, like, she set out to accomplish the purpose of being musical, and boy, is she successful in that. So she's able to, like, play instruments and accompany, vocalists. Like, that's super cool. So, like, all of my siblings, wherever they are, whatever passions they have, my parents have developed in us a drive to succeed and given us the tools to succeed. So again, that success looks different for each of us, but I think we all are striving towards something, and I think we all are taking steps to succeed. And we're gonna kind of like give you like a nice succinct list of like these are the things when we say like what are the things you can do to kind of help drive that, because every kid is different. So you kind of talked a little bit about your dad and conversations that you had. What would you say kind of when you just think about your parents in general, and as you've kind of been growing through these stages and these different roles, what do you feel like your parents did that really kind of that were defining things that kind of set you up for success? Yes. So I think my parents, personally did a great job raising me and my siblings, and, still continuing to. I think that they have done a really good job and they deserve praise for that. But I think it comes back to this debate between philosophers. So I'm going to be a little homeschool on you here for a second. There was an ongoing debate between Greek philosophers back in, BC, like way long ago, about can virtue be taught? And so they would have this discussion and be like, yes, virtue can be taught and here's why. No, virtue can't be taught and here's why. But one of the examples that they brought up that stuck with me is Well, if virtue can be taught, then why wouldn't these virtuous fathers have virtuous sons? Like, look at these sons and the despicable things they're doing. Like, surely the virtuous father would have wanted to have taught their son, their virtue, but they didn't because their son is despicable. So, like, clearly virtue cannot be taught. So, being homeschooled, this was one of the things we talked about, and my answer was, which is more valuable? Knowledge or experience, which is kind of what we were talking about with college. I think things can be taught, but they have to be taught through experience. And that's what my parents did. My parents have given me and my siblings the experiences we need to learn the things that we need to learn. And that's I think the huge difference. They gave us the experiences. They always talked about like making a safe place for us to try things, So I think that's the biggest thing that you can do for your kids. Give them the experiences they need.
And when we kind of talk about like what does that mean to give experiences, that's really kind of as a parent seeing maybe like what you are interested in, things you enjoy, maybe things you do well, and kind of helping to maybe like push you into like trying something like with those passions or those gifts.
Right. Because that is one thing that I don't think can be taught at all. Like you can't give someone a desire to do something. They have to want that for themselves. So maybe you have the most unambitious child who doesn't want to do anything but eat goldfish on the couch, like what are you going to do with that kid? Well, what you can start with is fan the passions that they do have, like for instance, with me, I wasn't always super ambitious in wanting to do things. Like right now, my goal is to go to space. My financial advisors tell me all the time that that's crazy. Not actually, but like I have some crazy goals. But I wasn't always that way. It started with a love of organization. I just loved a clean room. I just loved, nice calendar. I just loved clean things. And so my dad was like, hey, why don't you try bullet journaling? It's like this productivity system. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love productivity now. Like, let me try all the systems. Like, let me get my highlighting system and like, my calendar system and time blocking. And so I started to like productivity. And then I loved Star Wars. I discovered Star Wars and was obsessed with it. I did not know that Darth Vader was Luke's father. I was shook. Like my world was amazing. And so like my parents leaned into that and we went to all of the Star Wars movies opening nights. And how did I feel about that movie? We can talk about that another time, but like they leaned into that passion. And so then I realized like I really love like these creative things and learning how they made these movies and so I leaned into those passions. But it was because my parents like fanned the flame and gave me the books about productivity and gave me the opportunity to go watch those movies and gave me the opportunity to be an intern and drive me to places and what I was interested in, they leaned into. And then that desire grew in me to succeed.
I think it's hard because a lot of times parents will say, I don't have time. I can't, especially having 6 kids. Like, how could I give each of them the opportunities and their own passions? And so just as you're kind of describing some of the things, it's simply just driving you somewhere that you can do this. And so, and I'll talk with a lot of parents as, we sit at swim team or we go to different activities. And they're like, oh, so one's over here, one's over here. I just drop them off and then I'll pick them up. Like, it can even just be as simple as that, like getting them to the place where they can continue to like learn about those passions that they have.
Yes.
So you talked about like one big thing was kind of like education, and whatever like method you choose, like that was kind of one big pillar. One of the things as we've been talking is that one of the things that you've kind of said like through homeschool that you feel like you learned the most was really that you learned how to learn.
Yes.
Not just that you learned knowledge, gained knowledge, but that you learned how to learn. Do you want to just describe that a little bit?
Yeah. And I almost want to say this comes back to the experience piece again. The homeschool program that I was in was really heavily emphasizing the how to learn, So I, rather than sit in front of a teacher and the teacher tell me things, I was given a book on Latin and told complete these exercises. Here are the lessons, like go learn. And so I went and learned. And so then when I was given the role of creative director and told, go make a marketing plan, I went, okay, let me go figure out how to do that, And I was able to do that without being taught in some lecture that I had to, do it this way and these are the things to think about. So I think that education was huge in what my parents did for me. They made sure that I had the education I needed. Parents adapting to what their kids need is super important. I needed to be independent and learn how to do things for myself, and that is what my education gave me.
I think what's helpful too in that is, from my perspective as an employer, if I'm saying, hey, Anna, why don't you take your first chance at your first shot at creating a marketing plan? I'm looking at it and I'm kind of I don't want to tell her how to do this. I want to see what she's going to do, because I could tell you how to do it, but then it's going to be the way I build a marketing plan or how I would do it. But I want to see well, maybe you're going to think of things that I'm not. So I want to see that creativity, because maybe there's really great ideas that you have that I didn't think about, or the way to do them. And so it's you're giving someone the ability to now think for themselves,
right,
in order to do that. And as an employer, let's just kind of see how they go with this.
Right.
So that's good. Okay. Second, we talked about a big pillar. So education being the first. Kind of the second is kind of community. So community has been, as we've just talked about this, there were so many people involved in your story at different points. And so just that community, how did your parents, how would you say they kind of built that up? Or
Yeah, so my mom is a really good connector of people. She brings people together, and that's why she's so good at leading teams, because she knows how to plug people in exactly where they need to go. And most people would think oh, you were homeschooled, you poor thing, did you have any friends? Yeah, I had all of the friends, I was always surrounded by people. And I think it's an interesting point to highlight, lots of people can go to public school where they're surrounded by people and still be so alone. And yet I was homeschooled, where you would think I would be so alone, but I always had people around me. So my parents did a great job of always being in community. So our church, their small group, their jobs, my friends, sports teams, all the things, we had people around us. And they made sure that we were in positions where we could be poured into by older people, be mentored, or that we were in positions where we were surrounded by good friends who would learn alongside us and build us up. So I think that's so huge. They were super consistent with the community piece. We knew we had friends. We knew where to find people. If our parents fell off the face of planet Earth, we would be taken care of 100%. We had so many friends. And I use the word friends as adult friends, peer friends, younger friends. We had community. There were people always around us. And because of this, we got to experience different slices of life. We got to see how other people lived their lives and learn, for ourselves, did we like that experience? Did we not? How would we do things differently? That was huge.
And I think what people, what I think people don't realize that kids pick up from community is, let's say, you're standing around having a conversation as you're leaving from somewhere. Well, your kids might be standing there listening. So how do they talk? How do my parents talk with their friends? How do they talk with their coworkers? Emma loves coming into the office when she has a day off school, and
we love having Emma.
She loves coming in, and she's not afraid to talk to you guys, and just but she sees those things happen. So now she knows, well, I can have a conversation with someone like this. And so it's conversations, it's hearing what's heard. It's also knowing, that you can ask questions. And so there's things that people pick up from community. Your kids pick up as you're living in community, as you're around other people. And so a lot of times I think we kind of think oh, kids can't come with us places. But I mean, if Emma could, she would come with me everywhere. She just loves whatever I'm doing. And it's just, they learn so much and they watch you as you're just living life.
Right.
So there's a lot you pick up from that you just said, that they see. So that community is very important. Okay, so another one, I guess, do you want to kind of share just another one, kind of that you've seen from them, ways they set you up?
Yeah, so you kind of highlighted it right there, watching my parents in their lives. I would say my parents are very successful people, maybe not in the we have a mansion and 5 private jets and, they're successful in what they wanted to be successful in. And I have seen them in how they wanted to accomplish those purposes, and they've set out to accomplish them, and they've accomplished them. So watching my mom bring people together, and watching my mom use her administrative gifts, and watching my mom raise me and my siblings, and watching my mom, run our household. And the example of who she is in her life, super valuable. Same with my dad, watching him provide for our family, watching him build businesses, watching him, lead our family, watching him struggle with hard things in other people's lives that he has to like counsel them through, like watching them do these things and then also watching them come together and work together. That was huge. And so because my parents are such successful people and because my parents are such, good people, like I had that example and I grew up watching that example. And so I was able to learn from them in that.
Yeah, something else and I think that's one of the biggest things is that they watch you do it. Another thing that we've kind of talked about is just how you guys are going out there and you're working for it. Success doesn't mean, and being set up for success doesn't mean that it's handed to you. So you actually, you guys have part-time jobs, you have internships. So, you were still made to work for it.
Yes, I would say that's another huge thing that my parents did. They made us work for things. They absolutely provided for everything we needed and all the things that we want. But if we wanted to do something, if we had a passion about something, they didn't just hand it to us on a golden platter. They said okay, Anna, you want earrings? That's great. Prove it to us. Keep your room clean for, a month and we'll give you your earrings. I know with my younger brother, he wanted to play drums. And so my parents were like, okay, do you actually want to play drums? Do this work for us and show us that you're willing, that you're up to the task, that you're up to being responsible for it. So then, once he accomplished these tasks, my parents got him a drum set for Christmas. And they also got him drum lessons. So now my brother had to do the work of keeping up with those lessons and practice. And so now it's really interesting because my brother's at a place where he has a part-time job. And it's really interesting to watch him use his part-time job money on more drum equipment. And I don't really understand how it works, but there's more things and he's, learning to play and he's watching YouTube videos and he's listening to all kinds of heavy metal bands with all the drummers and, he's studying it. So my parents, they empowered us to do the things that we wanted to do, but they also made us work for it.
Yep. I think that's huge because a lot of times, as parents, we want to see that, I have a friend that's kind of I am happy to buy that soccer ball or that volleyball, but it would just sit around the house because I know they're not playing with it. So it's I'm not going to buy that thing if you're not going to do it. And so I think that's where parents, we want to see this passion, we want to see this desire. And so setting things okay, if you want that, do this. And you can very quickly see, are they willing to do this to get that? So,
right.
And I would also encourage parents that just because you don't see it at a young age, so even think fifth grade or before, it can still it could be in fifth grade that opportunity starts. Sometimes it's not until the opportunity of a middle school sport or something like that becomes available where they start to be oh, this is something I love, and they really start to develop that. So just so that, I think it's easy for parents to get discouraged when they see maybe someone that's on, playing a sport since they're in kindergarten, and they're they're really doing well, and my kids, like you said, eating Cheez-Its on the couch, and it's just and they want to play their video games. Every kid is different, but how are you kind of helping them to even try out, different things? So we'll talk about that a little more too. But, and then kind of just a last one that you kind of said, how your parents really kind of gave you or set you up for success.
Yeah, so the last thing, I was thinking about this, last night actually, as I was thinking through this podcast. They really encouraged us to live in the real world. And what I mean by that was if we want to succeed at something, there are going to be obstacles, right? Things are going to be hard. Things are going to come up. So they really encouraged us, don't be set back by problems. For example, I remember when I was young, I'd be oh, Dad, why can't we do this thing? Why can't we do that thing? Why is it this way? Why is it that way? And more often than not, his answer would simply be economics. And I'd be little 5-year-old Anna is what does that word, what do you mean? Growing up, though, I'm oh, actually, that makes a lot of sense why the world is the way it is. Because we live in a capitalist society. Economics is the driving force for a lot of things. The reason that Disney's content is so terrible right now, economics. They're trying to put out the maximum amount of content for the minimum amount of work. And so it's not going to be very good. Economics. And so just perspectives like that over and over and over again, it didn't create a cynical worldview, but it was we live in a corrupt world. you know, like, so my goals, even though I want to literally go to space, like, I need to live in the real world. And if I want to do that, there are a lot of things that need to happen. Think about the real world. How does the real world actually operate?
These are all the ways, like, parents have like, they can make such an impact on their kids' life in positive and negative ways. So if we're looking for those, like, there's just so many of them. When we talk about, okay, so what are practical ways? We've talked about a ton of them, like, just throughout kind of your story and conversation. But what are things that parents can do with their own kids? You know, some of these just from very young ages. I just even think it's like you might sign them up for like gymnastics or ballet classes, and these are like 6-week classes, you know, for like an hour maybe, and they're cute. But all of these, soccer or basketball, like, there's all these, like, a variety of things. Piano, maybe when they can start reading, you know, it's stuff like this that you start them with. It doesn't mean that they're going to do it forever, but you start them and they learn different skills in each of these different things. And I think what parents see about them, like, through doing those events, they kind of start to see who their kid is, and you start to see what they like or don't like. And so I think that's what kind of gives some insight into, oh, well, maybe this is something you enjoy. And you ask them, oh, what do you love about soccer or dance, you know?
Yeah.
So I think those are like little ways as little kids.
Yeah.
I guess even tell us, like, with little kids, I mean, even just like at Christmas time, like, we could give them any gifts. Like, what should we give them? How do I do that during that time?
Right. So, I mean, gifts are a great example of things that parents can do to set their kids up for success. So, like, did I get a lot of really fun gifts over the years? Oh, absolutely. But we also got a lot of really intentional, thoughtful gifts that would serve us. So, for instance, I got an iPad. That iPad was super fun. I got to do all kinds of things on it. But it also was a tool. I wrote all my essays on it, and I, you know, was able to start my Etsy shop through my iPad. And so, like, it was a very intentional tool, a way that I could do things. It wasn't just, you know, the next PlayStation. You know, it was a tool.
Yep.
And so similarly, like, my parents got my brother a drum kit. You know, that was super intentional. That was this is something that you can use and that you can grow in. But of course, like, there were lots of fun gifts too. Like, I got tickets to see Hamilton. That was super fun, and that didn't really have any educational value, but that was still an intentional gift because it wasn't another thing. It was an experience that I could enjoy and talk about forever, you know?
Yep.
So you can be really thoughtful with your gifts and how you use your gifts to set your kids up for success.
Probably around like ages 9, 10, 11, you might start to see things like, oh, they like to sing. Well, I could get them a stand-up mic and maybe they'll like sing more. And like, then they'll have confidence to sing into a microphone because, you know, they might be doing like piano or voice lessons or just something. So like 9, 10, you know, it could be a little bit later where you start to see, but I think around those ages are where you start to see your kids develop some type of an interest in something, even if it is like a sport. And so there might be something specific to their sport that you're like, oh, I could get them, you know, this training tool. Maybe they can do, they're at home, they could do like some exercises to build strength, stuff like that.
That's actually exactly what happened with one of my other sisters. She just started volleyball, and so her Christmas list was full of volleyball things. And she had our grandparents buy her this like volleyball training camp thing. So now she's like going to volleyball camp because that's what she wants to do. And so she said, hey, this would be a really great gift, not just another thing.
And I think that's what's cool is like even seeing like as your kids get older, the types of gifts they ask for, if they're asking for those things that help them in those interests, I think that's kind of cool because you're starting to see them see the value of that rather than just some random thing. But it is, you know, it is also sometimes nice to be like, oh, I do want you to like just enjoy reading a book or, you know, something like that. So I think that's what's fun when you can actually see that develop. Even just like family values, this is something, you know, as we've talked, you've kind of said like even as young kids, like what are things that are family values? What are things like being kind to others? Like what are those things that you can just talk about at dinner before they like have a passion that you're pouring them into?
Yeah, so this would be, I think, one of the most impactful things that my parents did. We have a set list of family values. There are 5 things that our family considers to be successful. These are the purposes that we want to accomplish as the Lewis family. Love God, family first, work with excellence, kindness and truthfulness towards other people, and be generous with your time and your money. Now, those 5 things were brought up at dinner at least once a week, like my whole elementary school. You know, like we were always talking about those. It was, Anna, what are the family values? I would list them off. And then it would be, Anna, how did you do one of those today? So like, because my parents defined here's what success looks like, me and my siblings had a really tangible way of like, oh, here's how I can succeed. Here's what success looks like. So maybe your family doesn't have a set list of family values. That might be something to consider because as I was a young kid, I didn't realize work with excellence. What does that mean? But like when I got to middle school and all of a sudden I was in middle school classes and then I was an intern, I was like, oh, work with excellence. That is something I value. I'm going to work until this project is done. And if it's not done, then I don't feel like I succeeded at all because I didn't, according to, our family values.
Yeah, even teaching kids to finish something that they start, that's huge. So that can play such a big role in all of these things. This one tied to even like our last episode where we talked about college funding and how much that has changed now for grandparents and parents. That's an episode I would encourage you, but there's even things like sometimes like to have a vested interest sometimes as you're trying to pass on money to generations behind you, like that can be a meaningful way to do that too. And then the next one, I think, and this is probably kind of what started, as you saw this in your family, is just as you're growing up, like having these open conversations.
Yes.
And just think now, like as you've been able to do this as you were younger and as you guys, like you and your siblings are getting older, now just fast forward like several years as you're still progressing through like many life changes for all of you, how these conversations are going to change, but how you're going to be able to openly talk about them because of all the support and encouragement throughout your life that you've had.
Right. I think one of the best things parents can do to set their kids up for success at any age, little kid or like 40-year-old kid, is these open conversations. And this is something we've kind of been highlighting across the podcast on a couple different episodes.
Yep.
If you can have an open conversation with someone about something, you are going to build your family's relationships a lot stronger.
Yep.
So there have been a lot of times where, like, we've had to sit down and have hard conversations about, maybe I was disobedient and I did something wrong. And so they would have that conversation with me when I was little. And as I grew older, they'd be like, Anna, these are character traits now that, like, these aren't the things we want to be seen in you. So here's, let's address them. So we would have hard conversations there. And as I'm getting older, I'm sure there are other hard conversations coming. But because we're able to have those in an open, transparent and like safe way, change happens and relationships are built and not torn down. And that's kind of what this whole episode is highlighting. Like, have these open conversations with your kids, with your parents, with your friends, with your mentors. Like, have conversations. This is what matters. And I know you were kind of talking about before, like, parents are going to feel much more at ease down the road handing their estate off to their kids if their kids are having open conversations with them. If you set your kids up for success, you're not going to need to worry about like your estate planner who's going to take care of you or any of that, because your kids are exactly where they need to be and they're exactly on track. So just something to keep in mind.
Exactly. I feel like these are the things where it's like, just think ahead of what you're going to want to do with your kids. Like when they're adult children, and you want to pass on a legacy to them, whatever that is, if that's monetary or otherwise, but just like, who are they going to have to be to receive that well? And so who are you helping to build them to be in whatever way you can? It doesn't guarantee it's going to happen exactly like you want. I guarantee it won't. Something's going to happen, but that is what shapes them into who they are, because they'll have their own story of these things.
Right. If you don't have kids, or if your kids are out of the house, or they don't live near you, or whatever, like, mentoring is such a great opportunity. I think there's such a need for it, especially with, like, Gen Z. Like, mentorship is so needed because, like, none of us know what we're doing at the end of the day. So, like, if you have experience that you can share with someone about, like, hey, here's how I did my college journey. Hey, here's how I deal with my finances. Like, hey, you're a growing artist. I'm an artist. Let me show you, like, how I developed my craft. Or, I am a mom and you are a young mom. Like, let me come alongside you and coach you. Like, that's so valuable. One of the most valuable things you can do is just share your experience with other people. And that has a name. It's called mentoring. So, like, just get involved. It's so So beneficial for this world.
And for everyone, it's not just the person on the receiving end.
Yes.
Actually, as the mentor, like, it is fulfilling when you know you're helping someone else and you're showing them something it might have taken you years to learn because somebody didn't show you. It's very fulfilling when you can be like, hey, I was able to like show them and explain to them something that it took me a long time to learn. That's fulfilling. For me, it is anyway. So I think it is for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Anna. I think this has just been a great example of, for people to listen in, and so many great ideas too. I will just say that your parents have done a great job. You have been set up for success. And I think that you're taking that and running with it. So it's not just, that you've been given things, but you're working for it. You're learning, you're continuing to learn. And, that you can see that in everything that you're doing. And we will continue to see that. So it's going to be exciting to see where everything goes. So no, we're like on our team, we're happy to have you and you do a great job. So that's part of, being an employer too, is just helping people continue to learn. I always say everyone may not be here forever, but at least we hope that if you aren't working here, that you're better off than when you first came. And so that's our goal, is that you're learning even while you're here.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. So thank you so much for listening. I know this might have been a little bit longer of an episode than normal. One of just the big things we've been trying to highlight in the last year is that relationships are so important, and they impact how we handle our finances and how we just interact in everyday life, and how we make the ability to handle our finances better or worse because of these relationships and how we interact with them on a daily basis. So especially with our family members, there's so many great ways that you can do it. So if you're looking for examples of this and the way we talk about it. So episode 35, we talked about the college funding challenge and how parents and grandparents can get involved. Also episode 25, we really talked about strong estate plans, family relationships within that. And so there's so many pieces where finances just weave into our everyday lives. So I hope this has been an example and just an example of a conversation that you might even want to have now with your kids, or just kind of do an inventory of what have we already done? What can we do next? And I hope this has given you a lot of great practical ways that you can be involved and just help your kids set up for success, whatever that looks like to you. And we will talk to you on our next episode.
Thanks for listening. To find any links or resources related to this episode, check out our show notes. Your host was Michelle Smallenberger, a certified financial planner and CEO. The guests featured are from Financial Design Studio, a team of experienced, fiduciary, fee-only advisors based in Chicago. Anna Lewis is the executive producer of the Behind the Designs podcast. And as always, for more information about Financial Design Studio and who we are, check out our website, financialdesignstudio.com. And final note, no content discussed on this podcast should be taken as financial advice. Financial Design Studio accepts no responsibility for your individual choices. We'll see you in the next episode.